Michael doesn't deserve a penny of that money. He is a financial disaster waiting to happen, my wife Rachel declared to her brother Derek. We need to make sure the family knows what kind of man he really is before the will reading. I listened from the next room, holding the recording device I had hidden in our living room. I walked into the room with a calm smile. The family should know exactly what kind of man I am. I am not an emotional man. I am an estate planning attorney. My world revolves around probate law, trust structures, and the meticulous documentation of family legacies. I believe in due process. I believe in evidence. And I believe that when people plot to steal what legally belongs to you, you document every word and let the law speak for itself. For 8 years, I thought Rachel and I were building a partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. I see now that I was just the mark in a long-term inheritance con, and she was positioning herself for the biggest payout of her life. This isn't a story about heartbreak. This is a story about a probate case that went exactly according to the evidence. When my father, Jonathan Thornton, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 6 months ago, the family dynamics shifted immediately. Dad was a successful real estate developer who had built a portfolio worth approximately $3 million. As his only son and heir, I was set to inherit the majority of his estate. Rachel had always been interested in my family's money, but she had been subtle about it. Little comments about how lucky I was to have such a generous family, suggestions about investment opportunities that would really impress your father, and a persistent curiosity about the details of Dad's will. The first red flag appeared 3 weeks after Dad's diagnosis. Rachel's brother Derek, a perpetually unemployed wannabe entrepreneur, suddenly became very interested in spending time with our family. Derek had a history of failed businesses, defaulted loans, and what my father diplomatically called questionable decision-making. Derek started showing up at family dinners, expressing deep concern about Dad's health, and making pointed comments about family responsibility and making sure the legacy is protected. Jonathan's worked so hard for everything he has built, Derek would say, his voice heavy with fake sincerity. It would be terrible if all that wealth ended up in the wrong hands. The wrong hands? I was the man's son, the heir he had chosen, and the attorney who had helped him structure his estate. But somehow, Derek was implying that I was a risk to my own inheritance. The second red flag was Rachel's sudden interest in my financial management. She started questioning my investment decisions, criticizing my spending habits, and making comments about my impulse purchases. Michael bought another expensive suit last week. She would tell Derek during their increasingly frequent phone conversations, I am worried he doesn't understand the value of money. The expensive suit had cost $180 from Men's Warehouse, but Rachel was building a narrative, and Derek was an eager audience. The third red flag was the family meeting Derek requested with my father. He framed it as a wellness check to make sure Dad was making sound decisions during this difficult time. I wasn't invited. Dad called me after the meeting, his voice tight with anger. Your brother-in-law just spent an hour telling me that you are financially irresponsible, he said. He is concerned that you will squander the family legacy. He thinks the will should be restructured to include more oversight. Derek wasn't just bad-mouthing me to my dying father. He was trying to restructure my inheritance to give Rachel control over my family's money. That is when I decided to start documenting everything. As an estate planning attorney, I understand the importance of evidence. In probate disputes, it is not about what people claim, it is about what you can prove. If Rachel and Derek were planning to interfere with my inheritance, I needed to document their conspiracy with courtroom, quality evidence. I placed small digital recording devices in our living room, kitchen, and home office. The devices were voice-activated and stored everything to encrypted cloud storage. Within a week, I had captured dozens of hours of Rachel and Derek's conversations. What I heard was worse than I had imagined. Michael's going to inherit millions, and he has no idea how to handle it, Rachel said during one of Derek's visits. He has never had real money before. He will probably blow it all on stupid investments. The family needs to understand that he is not the right person to carry on Jonathan's legacy, Derek replied. By the time we get to the will reading, everyone will know exactly what kind of financial risk Michael represents. What is the timeline? Rachel asked. Maybe 2 months. I need you to document every questionable spending decision Michael makes. Every expensive lunch? every unnecessary purchase. And then what? Then we present our case at the will reading. If we can show them that Michael is reckless with money, we can push for a trust structure that gives you oversight of the inheritance. My own wife was building a legal case against me based on fabricated evidence of financial irresponsibility. The woman I had been married to for 8 years was actively plotting to steal my father's legacy while he was dying of cancer. The most damning recording came 3 weeks before my father's death. I talked to a lawyer about this, Derek told Rachel. If we can establish that Michael has a pattern of financial irresponsibility, we can contest the will. Even if we don't win, we can force him into a settlement that gives you a significant portion of the inheritance. How much are we talking about? Rachel asked. Potentially millions. Your cut could be anywhere from 2 to 4 million if we play this right. They weren't just trying to limit my inheritance, they were planning to steal it. I spent the next 2 weeks building my defense case. Financial statements showing 8 years of responsible money management. Investment portfolios that had consistently outperformed the market. Documentation of every major purchase with receipts and justifications. I also researched Derek's financial history. 3 bankruptcies, 2 foreclosures, multiple defaulted business loans. The man who was questioning my financial responsibility had destroyed every dollar he had ever touched. Dad passed away on a Tuesday morning. The will reading was scheduled for the following Friday. On Thursday night, Rachel and Derek had their final strategy session. Tomorrow is the big day, Derek said. I will present our concerns about Michael's financial management during the discussion period. You back me up with specific examples. What if Michael objects? Rachel asked. He can object all he wants, Derek replied. We have documentation, we have witnesses. The family will listen to us because we are the ones who actually care about protecting Jonathan's legacy. Friday morning arrived. The will reading was held in the conference room of Morrison, Kent and Associates. My father's law firm. Present were myself, Rachel, Derek, my father's attorney, James Morrison, my uncle Robert, my aunt Carol, Derek's wife, Susan, and a paralegal recording the proceeding. James Morrison opened with the formal reading of the will. As expected, I was the primary beneficiary, inheriting approximately $6, $8 million in assets. Derek was not mentioned in the will. However, I understand there may be some family concerns about the distribution, Morrison said. I will open the floor for discussion. Derek stood up immediately. Thank you, James, he said, his voice heavy with practiced concern. I have to raise some difficult concerns about how this inheritance is being handled. He pulled out a folder of documents. Over the past several months, I have been documenting some troubling patterns in Michael's financial behavior. Reckless spending, questionable investment decisions, and a general attitude that suggests he doesn't understand the responsibility that comes with this level of wealth. He started reading from his list. The expensive suit purchases, the kitchen renovation plans, the impulsive decision to buy lunch without consulting a budget. The family needs to consider whether additional oversight might be appropriate to protect Jonathan's legacy. Rachel nodded solemnly. I have seen this behavior firsthand. Michael makes financial decisions without thinking about the long-term consequences. Uncle Robert frowned. Aunt Carol looked concerned. James Morrison turned to me. Michael, would you like to respond to these concerns? I stood up and reached into my briefcase. I would, I said calmly. But first, I think the family should hear exactly how these concerns developed. I placed a small digital audio device on the conference table. This is a recording from 3 weeks ago, I said, pressing play. Derek's voice filled the room. If we can establish that Michael has a pattern of financial irresponsibility, we can contest the will. Even if we don't win, we can force him into a settlement that gives you a significant portion of the inheritance. The room went dead silent. I pressed play on a second device. Rachel's voice. How much are we talking about? Derek's voice. Potentially millions. Your cut could be anywhere from 2 to 4 million, if we play this right. Derek's face had gone completely white. Rachel was staring at the audio device, like it was a bomb. These recordings were made legally in my home with single-party consent, I continued. I have approximately 6 hours of similar conversations documenting Derek and Rachel's conspiracy to interfere with my inheritance through fabricated evidence. I placed a thick folder on the table. I also have 8 years of financial documentation demonstrating responsible money management, including investment portfolios that have consistently outperformed market averages and perfect credit reports. I opened a second folder. Finally, I have Derek's complete financial history, including 3 bankruptcies, 2 foreclosures, and multiple defaulted business loans, totaling over $400,000. James Morrison was reviewing the documents with the expression of someone who had just witnessed a murder. Derek, I said, turning to face him directly, you said the family needs to consider whether additional oversight might be appropriate. I agree completely. I pressed play on a third recording device. Derek's voice from the night before. The family will listen to us because we are the ones who actually care about protecting Jonathan's legacy. The question is, I continued, who exactly is protecting this legacy from whom? Derek tried to speak, but I held up my hand. Rachel, I said, looking at my wife, you said I make financial decisions without thinking about long-term consequences. You are absolutely right. 8 years ago, I made the financial decision to marry you without considering the long-term consequences of tying my assets to someone who would eventually try to steal my inheritance. I placed a final document on the table. These are divorce papers. I am citing Rachel's conspiracy to defraud me of my inheritance as evidence of irreconcilable differences and breach of marital trust. Uncle Robert was the first to speak. Jesus Christ, Derek, he said, his voice shaking with anger. You were trying to steal the boy's inheritance while his father was dying? Derek finally found his voice. This is all taken out of context about getting your hands on $4 million. Aunt Carol interrupted. We heard the recording, Derek. James Morrison cleared his throat. Given the evidence of attempted inheritance fraud, I am required to document this incident in the probate file. Derek, I strongly recommend you consult with an attorney. Derek looked around the room at the faces of his family members. The disgust, the anger, the complete loss of respect. You recorded us. You set us up, Derek said, pointing at me. I documented your conspiracy to commit inheritance fraud, I replied, which, as an estate planning attorney, I am ethically obligated to do when I discover evidence of probate crimes. The inheritance stands as written, Morrison announced. Derek, given your documented attempt to interfere with this probate proceeding, I am recommending that you be barred from any future involvement in Thornton family estate matters. The room emptied quickly. Derek left without saying another word. Rachel tried to approach me, but I directed her to speak with my attorney instead. Uncle Robert shook my hand as he was leaving. Your father would be proud, he said. You handled that exactly the way he would have. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized, and Derek had declared bankruptcy for the 4th time. Rachel moved back to her hometown to work for a small insurance company. Derek's wife left him after learning about his inheritance fraud attempt. I had used a portion of the inheritance to establish a charitable foundation in my father's name and expanded my law practice to specialize in probate dispute resolution. Derek called me once to apologize, claiming he was desperate and thought I would make the same mistakes he had made. I told him the difference between earning money and taking money, between bad luck and bad character. When he asked if documenting their conspiracy was worth it, I explained that the real question was whether protecting my father's legacy was worth 6 weeks of recording conversations. The answer was obvious. In estate planning, like in life, the most important protection comes from proper documentation. Derek and Rachel thought they were planning an inheritance heist. They were actually providing evidence for their own prosecution. The recordings weren't revenge. They were just proper legal documentation, executed with precision and preserved for posterity. Justice, like a well-structured will, is all about the details.